Major breaking news. This will shock you. The United States is now instructing Kenya to end trade deals with China and its...
What we are witnessing right now may be one of the biggest shifts in global finance in decades. South Africa.
What's up, beautiful and amazing souls? Guys, in today's video, I want us to talk about why is it that, or why does America worry so much about the relationship between Africa and China? So, we are going to analyze the videos that we will be playing in this particular video of ours. You know, we have to pay some clips and then we watch them and then do a proper analysis. And what you're going to talk about is to explain the source of the American anxiety regarding the Africa-China relationship. So we are going to talk multipolarity. Okay, let's listen to these videos and then I'll be back.
Even in the US, clearly is nowhere near big enough, so they needed either India or Africa to create that partnership. The reason why Africa became the biggest concentrated market for China is because we share the same cultures. When you look at history, you look at the way we live, the way we raise our children, a lot of it is very, very similar. So they can really relate to the culture in Africa. And then 35 years ago, China was in the same exact position that Africa was today. Yeah, which is really deep, but they created a system that allowed them to figure out a way to move it in. So now China has all these factories, all this product. They can't keep all of that stored up in what's the names, but they also need to expand that audience too, as far as who all this product is going to. So Africa can utilize majority, at least 90% of the stuff that's being created in China today because of that culture, collaboration, you know? So what China's doing, they're creating, instead of buying, they're just bartering. They're saying, okay, listen, to keep our factories running, to keep this and that going, we need resources from Africa. We can't live without the resources. But in return, we want to be able to build infrastructure, you know, schools, roundabouts, bridges, and things of this nature. So that serves two purposes for Africa and for China, mainly. One, it gives China the distribution routes that they need to be able to create, you know, opportunity to sell more goods, distribute more goods, ship out more goods to a brand new audience. And two, it gives Africans the infrastructure that they need to be able to just set up a basic economy to gain enough revenue to even be able to afford that stuff. So it's a win-win situation when you look at it.
Right. And people are like, this is Akon is just being used and he's just China's trying to take over and giving them loans and whatever else. He said, not so. And he knows what he's talking about.
Right. Now, it is true. China is using Akon. And rightfully so. The right person to get something that needed to be done.
Right.
China, when I was in China, I think I mentioned this before, they were having commercials and little small blurbs on television that was showing the wonderful parts of China, how wonderful these people were, how pleasing, and because
wonderful parts of Africa.
Yeah. And how pleasing the African people were.
Yes.
It didn't show any of the negativity. And when you ever saw anything on Africa, it was always negative. It was always they're savages, they're beasts, the flies flying around kids. There's no food. They always show Rwanda. They always showed all of that, but they don't show that somebody's coming in and saying, okay, China, we're going to put a factory here and we're going to put it, and now Chinese factories are different. They are definitely like, you know, they want you to be a machine. And they were trying that in China too. So they even be in trial for that, beating and treating people not properly. But on the overall view, China went in, invested money, invested trade. Yes, you're making their product, but you're also giving them a trade, taking them out of, I would say, the age where everybody can just come in and give them vaccines.
Sweeping zero tariff initiative for African exports. It is offering duty-free access to all 53 countries on the continent that maintain diplomatic ties with China. The announcement was made in a joint statement issued after a high-level meeting between China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi and African officials in the Chinese city of Changsha.
China and Africa must stand in solidarity and pursue self-reliance. We must remain firmly on the right side of history, proactively spearheading the course of our times. The stability and resilience of China-Africa relations serve as a counterbalance to global uncertainty.
Something historic is happening, and most people in the West didn't see it coming. Quietly, deliberately, and with growing confidence, Africa is turning away from its traditional Western partners and moving closer to China. And this shift is sending shockwaves through Washington, Brussels, and London. Because this isn't just about trade deals or infrastructure loans. This is about power, it's about influence, and it's about who shapes the future of the global economy. For decades, Africa was treated as a peripheral player in global politics, rich in resources but poor in leverage. Central to Western supply chains but excluded from Western decision-making. The relationship was predictable. Africa supplied raw materials, the West supplied conditions. Loans came with strings, aid came with lectures, development came slowly, if at all. And when African nations questioned the system, they were told there was no alternative. Now, that assumption is collapsing. China didn't arrive in Africa promising charity. It arrived offering partnership, roads instead of rhetoric, power plants instead of policy papers, ports, railways, digital networks, and industrial zones instead of endless reform demands. And while critics in the West focus on debt narratives, African leaders are focused on something far more tangible: results. Across the continent, Chinese-built infrastructure is changing daily life. Railways in East Africa that cut travel times from days to hours. Ports in West Africa that handle volumes once thought impossible. Industrial parks that create jobs locally instead of exporting raw materials overseas. Telecommunications networks that connect rural communities to global markets. This isn't theory, it's visible. And for many African governments, it's persuasive. The deeper truth is that Africa's turn toward China didn't happen overnight. It was earned over years of frustration with Western engagement. African leaders watched as Europe and the United States spoke endlessly about partnership while protecting their own markets, subsidizing their own industries, and restricting African exports. They saw Western companies extract minerals and profits while leaving environmental damage and little value behind. And they noticed that when Africa tried to industrialize, it was often discouraged in the name of comparative advantage. China offered a different message: build first, argue later. And now the scale of the relationship is impossible to ignore. China is Africa's largest trading partner. Chinese companies are involved in thousands of projects across more than 50 countries. From mining and energy to manufacturing and technology, the economic link is deep and expanding. More importantly, it's evolving. Africa is no longer just exporting raw materials to China. It's negotiating processing, manufacturing, and technology transfer. That's what's triggering panic in the West, because this isn't just Africa choosing China. It's Africa choosing leverage. When Africa has options, Western pressure loses its bite. Sanctions matter less, aid conditionality weakens, and geopolitical influence shifts. Suddenly, African votes at the United Nations carry more weight. Strategic waterways, ports, and resources are no longer assumed to be under Western influence by default. From Washington's perspective, this looks like a strategic loss. From Europe's perspective, it looks like irrelevance creeping in. From Africa's perspective, it looks like long overdue autonomy. Take energy, for example. As Europe struggles with energy insecurity and climate transition costs, African countries are partnering with China to develop power generation at scale. Hydropower, solar, gas, and grid infrastructure are expanding faster than ever. That energy doesn't just light homes. It powers factories, it fuels industrial growth, and it keeps value on the continent, or consider critical minerals. Africa holds a dominant share of the resources needed for electric vehicles, batteries, and renewable energy technologies. Cobalt, lithium, copper, manganese, rare earths. For years,
My fellow Africans, let's be honest, African Union was never meant in favor of African citizens, but in favor of leaders across the continent of Africa. Have you ever realized immediately after the elections, they're usually at the forefront of congratulating leaders knowing very well in these particular elections, there was no transparency, there was no accountability, a total shutdown of the internet. Imagine in this digital world. But when the citizens are at the streets protesting against a particular thing they are encountering in their nation, they have never stood and actually spoke on behalf of those citizens. They have never stood and denounced what the leader in that particular nation is doing. They've never even stood and denounced how the people or the citizens are being unalived across Africa. In Tanzania, we saw people were unalived. We've seen nations where people are being unalived, but African Union have never stood to denounce that. But when a leader take leadership with a coup across Africa, that's when African Union knows how to speak. It is not constitutional. You should respect your sovereignty. That is not a democratic practice. You should actually do what the constitution says. That's when they start rising. And that's when you will realize that African Union knows how to speak, giving out strategies on how a nation should be. But when the citizens are bleeding, they cannot speak. And it's a clear indication they're usually here in favor of leaders, not citizens. Anyway, what's your thought on that? Drop it at the comment section. And if I offended you, very sorry. That's my simple opinion. Drop yours at the comment.
This has to be the most disingenuous man on earth, honestly. Like the way he's speaking as if we don't know what is going on behind the scenes.
It's time for us to just put the imperial hat back on to say, we're going to govern those countries if you're incapable of governing yourselves, because enough is enough. We're done being invaded.
Because our own national security risk is at stake.
Exactly.
National security interests are at stake.
You can say that about pretty much all of Africa. They're incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens because the governments there are all about looting and pillaging and lining their pockets and going shopping in Paris instead of actually making their country better.
People on the left are going to watch this. They're going to say, wait a minute, Eric Prince is talking about being a colonialist again.
Absolutely. Yes.
That man you just saw, his name is Eric Prince, and he's an ex-Navy SEAL. But also, by the way, you might find this point very interesting. He was the founder of a private military company. This is the same man telling us that Africa should be recolonized because, we can't do it on our own, when he knows for a fact that his own people are working against us behind the scenes, hiring these puppet leaders, hiring these sellouts, and looting from us, as if that doesn't play a role in where we are right now. It's just us. We're the problem. And so the conclusion is for the West or the US to recolonize us, basically. What? Be for real. Be serious. Don't play with our intelligence.
Very concerned lately about China. They are now all over Africa, buying things and investing over there and getting those countries dependent on them and supporting, non-democratic people. And I'm just
like
wondering,
whom?
Well,
we are in a country that supports Saudi Arabia.
Yes, that's true. Right.
So suddenly we have a problem with, superpowers supporting non-democratic people?
Yes, I do. They're in Africa. They're lending money to countries to build ports and different infrastructure.
To build what?
Port,
and harbors. What's wrong with that?
And, because...
Countries that need ports get ports.
But they're making people dependent on... I know, it's the same thing that we've done, which is horrible around the world.
They are far more humanistic than the United States ever was.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. So...
Let me give you an example. Of course they are peddling for influence.
Yeah.
Yeah? But they are non-interventionist. Absolutely non-interventionist in a way that Europeans, the West, has never managed to fathom. When it comes to the influence of China outside its borders, I have to say, firstly, it's quite remarkable that they don't seem to have any military ambitions. Secondly, Africa. I'll give you an example, a specific example. Ethiopia. 2004, because I happened to be there, and I have some first-hand experience of it. They went into Ethiopia. I'll tell you why they went into Ethiopia, because they suspected there was oil. Because China is a major industrial power, but it lacks primary resources. Now, instead of going into Africa with troops, colonially, destroying the country, killing people like the West has done for the last 100 years, what they did was, they went to Addis Ababa, and they said to the government, we would like, we can see you have problems with your infrastructure, we would like to build some new airports, upgrade your railway system, create a telephone system, and rebuild your roads. And we'll do this all for free. No strings attached. We don't want anything from you. And they did. Why did they do it? Because it's soft power. Because because they knew that if oil is discovered, and it was discovered later, then, of course, the Ethiopian government will be much more open to Chinese oil companies coming there. They have never combined their investment with imperialistic. Can you imagine if that was a German company or an American company? That's why I'm saying I don't think you should worry.
Okay, I won't.
So get this right, Kenya just curved China, and America's fingerprints are all over it. So here's what happened, right? Ruto was meant to sign a major trade deal with Beijing. Talks started back in 2022, but just before the ink could dry, Kenya delayed the final signing. At the same time, the US trade officials flew in and landed in Nairobi. Even the US trade rep pulled up, right? Pushing Kenya to focus on the US-Kenya strategic trade and investment partnership instead. So now Kenya's stuck, right? Two superpowers, one small window to move smart. Thinking China is one of Africa's biggest trade partners with record volumes over the last decade and billions through Belt and Road. But that also means heavy infrastructure debt, especially from projects like the SGR Railway. And then if you flip it to the other side, the US brings security, diplomacy, tech and training deals, but they rarely build. And when they do, the paperwork comes with strings around politics, patents, and who really profits. So who's better, Chinese concrete or American contracts? For everyday Kenyans, it can feel like a trap either way. Debt versus dependency, loans versus leverage. But here's a layer that isn't often spoke about, right? It's not just who you trade with, it's what you trade and what you build. If we keep exporting raw and importing rich, no trade deal will save us ever, right? Coffee out, lattes back, copper out, phones back. That's how you stay stuck. To the leaders, start with home first, man. Intra-Africa trade is still under 15% of total trade, even with Africa in motion. That's the real opportunity, guys. Build factories, process our own goods, create regional value chains so we are selling finished products, not just dirt. And where necessary, negotiate with Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, but negotiate like owners, not orphans. And to the people, watch where the money flows, not just the headlines, because whoever controls the ports controls the play. Anyway, let's talk in the comment section. What are your thoughts on this?
Africa does not need democracy.
What do we need?
It's a smokescreen of lies, which allows imperialism and neocolonialism to continue. Africa needs dictators. Africa needs military dictators.
Military, not just any other dictator.
Military for security. Dictators in that they must dictate the right thing. We need people that are purposeful, cutting down the bureaucracy of democracy and getting things done. If you walk up into your parliament right now, you'll have papers the size of this room of good ideas that have never been implemented, roads that have never been finished, buildings and hospitals that have not been repaired, but budget approved and voted. It's in the pipeline. It's in the pipeline. And in the midst of that pipeline, procurement, corruption, and preferential procurement, looting and stealing is happening. How does a minister walks into a government with 50,000 shillings become a millionaire in 2 years with a salary that can't afford 3 pairs of shoes? Where does he get the money from? Any government minister who becomes a millionaire after being to a government office is a thief.
That's true. That's very true.
There's no millionaire who becomes a millionaire through government salaries. I make that statement loud and clear. So this whole concept of democracy is a facade, the entertainment for the poor, to think that by voting a president into power, they've actually put a man in control. We need people like Traore, who wakes up in the morning and said, I need 3,000 trucks of road equipment on the road by tomorrow. And 3 kilometers from Ghana into Burkina Faso, they are there by tomorrow. I need a hospital there. I need an aeroplane manufacturing industry there. I need and you need to give a president power, the one who can decide, not the one who can steal, the one who can decide and make a change.
Kenya is standing its ground after US lawmakers raised concerns over its growing partnership with China. Nairobi says it's about sovereignty and not switching sides. During a Senate hearing, Senator Jim Risch blasted Kenya for calling China a co-architect of New World Order, suggesting Nairobi was leaning towards Beijing. Kenya fired back, with lawmaker Nelson telling Senator Risch that this isn't a pivot, but about fairness, dignity, and giving Africa a voice in shaping global systems. President Ruto recently signed 20 major deals with China, including a plan to extend Kenya's railway to the Ugandan border, deepening a new strategic partnership. Despite the criticism, Kenya insists its ties with the US remain strong, highlighting decades of development, defense, and diplomatic cooperation. Do you think Kenya's balancing act with China and the US is bold or risky? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below.
Ethiopia's mega dam, which is the largest hydropower project in Africa, is a big problem. That's according to US President Donald Trump, as he restarts what he called efforts to resolve the long-running dispute between Ethiopia and Egypt over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam GORD. Trump said the dam, which was inaugurated in September 2025, basically blocks the Nile River and denies neighboring countries, including Egypt, the water they need from the river. He made the comments as he hosted Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland on Wednesday.
It's become a very dangerous issue, the dam, and I'll see if I can get that back on track.
Downstream countries, particularly Egypt and Sudan, have long complained about the filling and operation of the dam and called on Ethiopia to reach a legally binding agreement with them to guarantee them fairer access to the Nile water and ensure environmental protection. However, Ethiopia says the $5 billion dam, as it's constructed, is crucial for its energy and agricultural needs to boost its economy. The facility has an installed capacity of more than 5,000 megawatts of electricity. President Trump said his administration was working to get negotiations between the African neighbors back on track. Trump's latest comments come less than a week after he offered to mediate between Cairo and Addis Ababa, with Egypt's President Sisi welcoming the initiative. The Nile is Africa's longest river, stretching nearly 7,000 kilometers. It runs through 11 countries: Burundi, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Eritrea, South Sudan, Sudan, and Egypt.
What we are witnessing right now may be one of the biggest shifts in global finance in decades. South Africa has just made history by becoming the first African banking partner to directly connect with China's cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS. For the first time, African businesses can now pay Chinese suppliers using the renminbi instead of routing everything through the US dollar. It may sound technical, but this move quietly challenges a financial order that has dominated world trade for generations. And in Washington, the alarm bells are ringing. Reports suggest leaders in the United States, especially President Donald Trump, are uneasy, even angry, about countries moving away from the dollar's orbit. Because this isn't just a payment decision, it's a signal, a sign that Africa is beginning to rewrite the rules of global trade. The big question now is simple but profound. Is this the start of a new era, one where the dollar's grip weakens and Africa steps into a different kind of financial power? In this video, we're going to break down exactly what South Africa has done, what China's CIPS system really is, why the US dollar might be losing ground, how President Trump and American policymakers are reacting behind the scenes, and what this turning point could mean for Africa's future in global finance. Because this isn't just another economic headline, it's a signal that the global balance of power may be shifting faster than anyone expected. To understand the weight of this moment, we first need to look at what South Africa actually did. This wasn't a political gesture or a symbolic announcement. It was a technical move with huge consequences. Standard Bank, one of South Africa's biggest financial institutions, has officially connected to China's cross-border interbank payment system, known as CIPS. And with that single connection, South African banks can now send and receive money directly in Chinese yuan, completely bypassing the US dollar system that has dominated world trade for nearly a century. Before now, when a South African company wanted to trade with China, the money had to take a long, complicated journey. The rand was first converted into US dollars. Then those dollars were converted again into Chinese yuan. Every step added fees, delays, and, most importantly, dependence on a system controlled by the United States. But with CIPS, that entire middle layer disappears. A South African business can now pay a Chinese supplier directly in yuan. A Chinese company can pay a South African partner without ever touching the dollar. Suddenly, trade becomes faster, cheaper, smoother, and far more predictable. And this is why the decision is being called historic. China is South Africa's largest trading partner. Billions of dollars worth of goods move between them every year. By joining CIPS, South Africa isn't just upgrading a payment system, it's aligning itself with its biggest economic relationship. But this move is about more than efficiency. It's about control, sovereignty, and the power to decide how a nation moves its money without waiting for permission from a foreign financial gatekeeper. As many of you already know, the US dollar system gives Washington enormous influence. Any country that depends on it can be watched, pressured, sanctioned, or even cut off entirely. So by connecting to CIPS, South Africa is reducing that vulnerability. This doesn't mean South Africa has abandoned the dollar, not yet, but it does mean the country has built an escape route. And once an alternative exists, the balance of power begins to shift. This is why the reaction in Washington has been so strong, especially among leaders like President Donald Trump, who firmly believes America's power is tied to the dominance of the dollar. For the United States, the dollar is not just a currency, it is leverage, it is reach, it is geopolitical muscle. So when a major African nation chooses a different pathway, it strikes at the foundation of that influence. To understand why this hurts Washington, we need to go back to the moment the dollar became king. After World War II, the United States emerged as the world's strongest economy and the holder of most of the world's gold reserves. Before joining the war, America had supplied the Allies with weapons, oil, food, and machinery. Most of those countries paid in gold, and by the time the war ended, the US had accumulated a massive portion of the world's gold supply. So when peace finally arrived, other nations couldn't return to the old system, the gold standard, because their reserves were drained. And that moment opened the door for something new, something that would give the United States unprecedented financial power for generations. So in 1944, with the world still burning from war, delegates from 44 allied nations gathered in a quiet town called Bretton Woods in New Hampshire. Their mission was simple but enormous: rebuild the global financial system in a way that would not cripple any nation. But what they created that year would rewrite the world's economic future. The delegates agreed that global currencies would no longer be tied directly to gold. Instead, they would all be pegged to one currency, the US dollar. This became known as the Bretton Woods Agreement, and overnight, the dollar became the anchor of global trade. Countries no longer needed to stockpile gold. They needed to stockpile American dollars. That was the moment the dollar became the world's reserve currency. With this system in place, Washington gained an extraordinary amount of influence. But that influence exploded even further in the 1970s, when Saudi Arabia signed a landmark deal with the United States, an agreement that would come to be known as the Petrodollar Agreement. And this deal would lock the world into the dollar system for generations.
Ethiopia has announced plans to print its own currency locally, ending decades of reliance on foreign firms. And this is actually huge because most African countries still print their money abroad, actually usually in the same countries that once colonized them. So the UK, France, Austria. Ethiopia is saying, we're going to build a mint in Addis, backed by a $140 billion state investment arm, which means ultimately they'll no longer have to wait on Europe in order to circulate the birr. And whilst this is a great source of national pride, it's also about the money. If you think about it, Ethiopia is spending millions a year just to outsource the printing of its own currency. So that's millions leaving the economy before it even hits the streets. And now they're like, we want to own that process and move towards sovereignty, control both the supply and the flow. Obviously, this isn't a risk-free process, right? Printing money isn't just logistics. It's politics. It's discipline. If the government overprints, they'll get inflation. They'll lose trust. The money starts moving backwards while prices jump forwards. And the printing itself, I guess it's not the biggest risk, but it is a pretty big one because this is a highly technical, expensive process. Globally, I think only around a quarter of countries print their own money. In Africa, just 9 out of 54. Everyone else literally still sends their orders overseas. So the real work will go beyond the press. It's important that they don't just print money at home and that they protect the value, back it with exports, productivity, assets, and discipline. That's what's going to make the currency strong. And if Ethiopia gets this right, they won't just print for themselves. This could actually become a huge opportunity for them to export, right? Become the printer of East Africa, the Horn, maybe actually even beyond. More than 40 African countries still outsource. Ethiopia could flip that into an opportunity, into revenue, into regional trust, and a new form of local power. But that only works if the house is in order. No inflation, no misfires, just quality, transparency, and proof. Because in the end, printing is just only as important as the trust that comes behind it, right? Anyway, let's talk about in the comment section.
Major breaking news. This will shock you. The United States is now instructing Kenya to end trade deals with China, and it's turning out that Kenya is halting China trade deals following the pressure from the United States. United States want Kenya to prioritize AGOA. AGOA is a US law providing preferential access to American market for eligible sub-Saharan nations. And let me tell you, this is a great impact of being a puppet that you have to follow orders from above, and it's turning out Kenya as a nation, it's losing its own sovereignty. They cannot stand still by their own and decide on what to do. United States President Donald J. Trump is bullying any nation, most especially the vulnerable. And this is a great indication why South Africa never wanted to play any balls with the United States. You remember when the G20 was in South Africa and the United States was trying to bully South Africa, but Ramaphosa stood still and said that United States, you can never bully us. We as South Africa, we have to respect our own sovereignty, and you are not here to instruct us what to do and not what to do. And we can do without you, and there is nothing you can do about it. Now look, the pressure is in Kenya right now that Kenya is literally losing its spine to stand on its own, or rather follow orders from above on what to do and not what to do. Oh my goodness, Kenyans, it's getting hotter.
Thank you so much for listening, guys. So after listening to the video, to the clips, keenly, guys, I want us to agree on one thing, that for Pan-Africanists, the goal is actually clear. We are talking about sovereignty, self-determination, and the freedom to choose partners on the global stage. That is what I have understood from what these people are saying, So Africa is not a prize to be won at the end of the day. But all I can say is that it's a continent asserting its urgency. So in this multi-polarized world, the relationship between Africa and China has become one of the most significant geopolitical development of the 21st century. So, my good people, the relationship between Africa and China has been viewed with a profound anxiety in America. And this video, it's not just about debating or talking about the advantages of China's engagement. It's also about dissecting the American concern so that we may be in a position to understand the interests, the fears, and strategic calculations that drive the United States critique of the Africa-China partnership. So, guys, what do you think about this relationship? Africa, they feel like America is all about, talking. But China, they're coming in with infrastructure. They are coming in with meaningful partnership, meaningful loans. The American concern is rooted in geopolitical competition. The United States views China not as a competitor but as a strategic rival who is seeking to reshape the global order. Remember that America has been the world order. Most of the systems that we use worldwide, be it tech, be it financial system, agricultural system, name them, it's controlled by the Americans. And when they see China getting into Africa, running the mining sites in DRC Congo, building infrastructure, building bridges, no, they are not happy at all. So for them, they view China as a strategic rival. So from the Americans' point of view, Africa is a very critical battleground in this context as we are speaking. For them, they believe that it's a battleground. They need to fight for these resources that are in Africa. We need to control these people. The primary fear that the Americans have in their minds is the erosion of the African influence. They have actually a very huge influence on Africa to the point that they even have military bases here. It's like we are just running on their roles. We are free but not free. We understand the freedom that we have, the freedom to have the flag, the freedom to sing the national anthem, but not real freedom. So China has basically been one of the largest Africa's trading partner since the year 2009. They have been giving us billions of money into infrastructure. They have been giving us billions of money to invest on road initiatives and also construction, housing. And when I talk about housing, affordable housing, but that they only deal with it in the capital cities because that's where there is the market. Of course, they cannot invest in the rural areas. So the US, the Americans, they view this as a deliberate strategy to build political loyalty and secure votes in the international bodies like the United Nations. That's what the Americans view. That's what they see. But shockingly, China has never ever involved itself into the political matters of the Africans. What they do is that they only come in with loans. It's a very meaningful partnership, I would say. And they don't manipulate, they don't even want like these seats. Americans, they just want the leadership positions in almost all the bodies that govern staffs in the world. So their primary fear is that erosion of the African influence. So when Africa aligns itself with China on key resolutions, Americans are not happy. They're going to interpret this as a direct loss of its own global standing. They have to remain to be the superpowers. That's what they feel. So this anxiety is actually compounded by security concerns. China has established itself like all over the world, especially in third world countries. That's what they saw an opportunity in. And most of the goods are sold in these developing countries. Actually, they have come in, they have partnered together economically, and most people are thriving. In fact, they have created so many jobs for people in Africa because their goods, they are tax free or the rates are really lower. So you'll find that goods are sold in these African countries, they are China made. 90% or even 99%. The 1% are from other countries and they are super expensive because of the import tax, the tariffs. So China is better off with Africa than America, I believe so, and the Americans are not happy at all. So America fear the fact that China's economic influence is going to be inevitable. They Because once something has grown, it's really hard to bring it down. So that's what they are actually trying to avoid, and they are introducing something that we call political military response. So guys, America has really publicized its critique when it comes to China and the loan trap diplomacy, the debt trap diplomacy, because these people are telling the world that China is offering large opaque loans for infrastructure projects that African nations cannot realistically repay. So that is the narrative that they are trying to push, a debt trapped diplomacy. The debt is unrealistic. We will not be able to pay it back, and that's why they don't really want them to partner with the Africans. So when if Africa gets to be controlled by China, then America loses its superpower, the superpower badge of honor, I will say, and that's what they are fearing. Many African countries, many Pan-Africanists point out that this narrative that the Americans are trying to push only serves as a Western propaganda because they want to discourage Africans from doing business together with China, with Russia, and the rest of the world. So USA fears that African nations will be working so much with Beijing, and that is going to be a plus on the other side, and it's going to make political and economic decisions to be favorable to China, which is not really comfortable. They're not comfortable with it. So when it comes to minerals, they feel like China is coming in. They want to take over the minerals, and that's what they have been protecting by having these military bases in Kenya. So when we talk about green energy, they have been really promoting that. There has even been a budget about it, and they feel like China coming in to mine these minerals like cobalt, like lithium, and other rare earth minerals and resources and elements, it's not really fair because in the first place, they are the people that came in, they are the people that started everything, and China wants to just come over again and do their own thing without even consulting us. And the fact that most African countries don't want to use the dollar currency again, they just want a local currency so that at least we can benefit, because at the moment anything that is being traded in between African countries, it has to be a dollar. It has to go through New York City and then back to the country that they are selling these items, which is not really good at the end of the day, because as Africans we are not benefiting anything. So America fears that it's a supply chain, future tech, from electric vehicles to advanced weaponry, all this will be dependent on a strategic rival, and they don't like that at all. So they are really trying to bring this narrative of, Africa is being given unrealistic debts by China, the debt trapped diplomacy, blah. So, in conclusion, if you've noticed something from way back, America has most of the time promoted a model whereby development is tied to a liberal democratic norm, whereby they talk about transparency, anti-corruption, and introducing these anti-corruption measures, and then they talk about human rights. So that's the context that they have been coming or talking about when it comes to the relationship between them and the African nations. So on this other side, we have China, who have come in a very different approach. So their approach is where there is no strings attached. It's only business and business only, nothing else. So, my good people, Americans' concern over the Africa's and China relationship is actually driven by three primary fears. That is the loss of geopolitical context, loss of controlling over critical economic resources, and the loss of the ideological battle for global governance. So, as a Pan-Africanist, our takeaway is that it's not good to choose a side, but it's good to recognize that this rivalry is an opportunity for us. The true goal to leverage the competition between global powers is to secure the best possible terms for African development and to strengthen the working peoples of Africa, because when we unite, for those who work, if you unite, we're gonna be able to transform our own country without really needing the help of other nations. So when America comes in and they feel threatened, they have the fear in them. It's actually a reflection of its own declining global power, the global power thing. And our future is Africa must be defined by an African agency, the agency for freedom, the agency for sovereignty, the agency to grow. So thank you so much if you listen the video up to this point. I appreciate your presence. I'll see you in the next video.